I'm 29, and until last week, I honestly thought moving out would be the calmest thing I'd ever do. I packed the way people pack when they're trying to avoid drama. I taped every box shut, wrapped my shoes in old hoodies, and held my laptop bag tight against my chest like it could somehow hide me. I waited until nobody was home. Then I carried the last box down the hallway, stepped outside, and for a second, I actually felt relieved. Then my phone buzzed. Not a call, not even a text, just a notification saying someone tagged me in a post. I opened it expecting some dumb joke. Maybe one of those passive-aggressive memes my family loves posting when they want to insult somebody without saying it directly. But instead, I saw a picture of the front door I had just walked out of. My old bedroom window was in the background. The caption hit me like a punch. Finally, the freeloader is gone. At first, I laughed. It was so mean it almost didn't feel real. Then I looked lower and saw over 1,000 likes. People weren't just seeing it, they were enjoying it. And the comments kept coming, one after another. My mom commented, "No more cooking and laundry for a loser?" My dad didn't say anything at all, which somehow hurt worse. But he liked a comment that said unemployed people should learn to survive on their own. That's when my hands stopped shaking. Not because I got used to the insults, but because of how sure they all were about who I was. None of them actually knew the truth. I didn't answer. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even cry. I just kept scrolling. Read every comment. Every name. Then I did something most people would probably call pathetic. I liked every single comment. Because I needed them relaxed. I needed them confident. I needed them thinking they had already won. After that, I put my phone down, sat on the floor of my new apartment surrounded by unopened boxes, and made a choice that changed everything. A week later, my phone exploded nonstop. 24 missed calls, 33 messages, voicemails, audio messages, panicked apologies that didn't even sound sincere. Suddenly, they wanted to talk. Suddenly, they needed something from me, and that's when I realized I had picked the perfect time to disappear. Too late. If they think this whole story is only about some nasty Facebook post, they're about to find out the real reason that house was never actually theirs, and why all their confidence disappeared the second I stopped keeping quiet. Most people who saw that post probably assumed I got kicked out. They pictured me as some lazy guy living off his parents, sleeping half the day, eating their food, and doing nothing with my life. That's the version my family pushed for years because it made them look like hardworking victims. And it made me look like the punchline. But the truth never matched their story. That house outside Columbus didn't belong to them. Not really. They didn't earn it. It wasn't some reward for hard work. They were just allowed to live there. For years, they acted like the real owner didn't exist, even while I sat across from them at the dinner table. My grandmother on my mom's side, Lorraine, was the only person in the family who actually saw me for who I was. She was tough, straight to the point, and had zero patience for excuses. When I was a kid, she'd walk into the house carrying grocery bags, take one look at the pantry, and start asking questions that instantly made my mom uncomfortable. Lorraine didn't hate my mother. She hated the way she handled money. There were always shopping boxes piled on the porch. Weekend trips charged to credit cards like bills didn't matter. My mom borrowed money from Lorraine using that sweet fake voice, then acted insulted anytime Grandma asked for it back. Back then, I didn't understand any of it. I was 8 when we moved into Lorraine's house. All I cared about was that the neighborhood felt safe, the backyard had a swing set, and for the first time ever, I had my own room. My sister acted like we inherited a mansion. My parents treated the place like proof they'd finally succeeded. But Lorraine treated the whole thing like a test. When she passed away, I was 22. I sat through the funeral wearing an uncomfortable suit, watching my mother cry like her heart was broken. But I'd seen those tears before. I'd seen her cry when bills piled up, and she needed somebody else to rescue her. A week after the funeral, the lawyer asked us to come in for a meeting. I thought it was just paperwork. My mother showed up expecting money. My sister came because she loved being included in important things. Then the lawyer slid a folder across the desk and explained that Lorraine had made her final decision years earlier, and she'd been very clear about it. The house was left to me. Not my mother, not my father, not split between the family, just me. I still remember how fast my mother's face changed. First confusion, then anger, then a smile that looked completely fake. The lawyer explained the condition. My parents and sister were allowed to stay there as long as they wanted. There was no deadline, no eviction notice waiting for them. But the house legally belonged to me. Legally, the house was mine, completely mine. And Lorraine made sure every detail was documented because she knew my mother would probably refinance the place into the ground the second it ended up in her name. Looking back, I should have spoken up then. I should have protected myself. But I was 22, grieving my grandmother, and raised to believe that being a good son meant staying quiet. So I signed the papers, nodded along, and went back to living in a house everybody still acted like they owned. Less than a month later, my mother was throwing backyard cookouts like nothing had changed. She showed off the kitchen to neighbors like she'd paid for it herself. My dad started talking about remodeling the bathroom. My sister posted pictures online bragging about our house, like she earned it personally. And then came the part that still makes me sick when I think about it. I started paying rent. $250 every month for 7 straight years. Nobody forced me to sign a lease. My mother would just sigh and complain about money being tight, then look at me like I owed her for raising me. So I paid. I paid while delivery bags kept showing up every weekend. I paid while all the streaming subscriptions stayed active. I paid while my mother bought new decorations for the living room and posted photos online talking about how hard she worked. And anytime I reminded myself I technically owned the place, it sounded ridiculous in my head. Because in that house, ownership meant nothing. Power was the only thing that mattered. From the outside, I was easy to judge. I stayed home most of the time. I was always on my laptop. I rarely dressed like somebody heading to an office job. To my family, that was enough proof that I was a failure. To them, real work meant uniforms, bosses, and schedules you could brag about to the neighbors. Anything else looked fake. What they never cared enough to learn was that my bedroom had slowly turned into my office. Not a hobby room, not some place where I hid from life. A real workspace where I built a business while they laughed at me. For 5 years, I worked as a freelance copywriter and e-commerce funnel strategist. I wrote product descriptions, email campaigns, landing pages, and ad copy for small businesses that couldn't afford expensive marketing agencies but still needed results. I helped a candle company double their online sales. I fixed the checkout process for a gym that kept losing customers. And I didn't do any of it for experience or favors. I did it for signed contracts, paid invoices, and deposits hitting a bank account nobody in my family could touch. I kept my work a secret on purpose, not because I was embarrassed, but because anytime I tried explaining what I did, my mother would brush it off and say sitting at a computer all day wasn't a real job. My sister made it worse. She joked to her friends that I was probably doing something illegal online. She said it like she was kidding, but she wanted people to believe it. After a while, I stopped defending myself. I bought a mini fridge for my room so nobody could complain about me eating their food. I started doing laundry late at night just to avoid hearing comments about how useless I was. I skipped family cookouts and Sunday dinners because every conversation turned into people talking over me like I wasn't even sitting there. Most nights, I just ordered my own food and stayed in my room. That isolation wasn't by accident. It was survival. And honestly, the hardest part wasn't the money or the chores. It was hearing them talk about me like I was some burden they generously tolerated, like I was a permanent problem in the house. When my boyfriend found out I still lived at home at 28, he tried to act understanding. But I could still see the disappointment on his face. He told me he couldn't picture a future with someone who hadn't really started their life yet. I tried explaining the situation with the house. I told him things weren't what they looked like. But he didn't want the complicated version. He wanted a short explanation he could easily repeat to other people. So he left. And my family treated it like proof they'd been right about me all along. What none of them understood was that while they were judging me, I was making plans. Quietly. Carefully. I wasn't trapped there. I was preparing my exit. The plan wasn't dramatic. At least not yet. I gave myself 18 months because I didn't want to leave in panic and end up crawling back. I wanted out the right way. No debt, no borrowed money, no excuses anybody could use against me later. I tracked every dollar I made, paid my taxes on time, kept every contract organized in folders. I saved enough money to survive slow months because freelance work can change fast, and I refused to let my family watch me fail. While my mother thought I was wasting time online, I was negotiating better contracts and raising my prices. While my sister mocked me for always being on my laptop, I was building a client list full of people who respected my work and couldn't care less what my family thought of me. The apartment I finally bought wasn't fancy, but it was clean, quiet, and completely mine. It was a small one-bedroom place near Columbus, but the second I walked inside, I felt like I could finally breathe again after years of keeping everything bottled up. I never told my family I was apartment hunting. I didn't ask for advice. I didn't even mention the mortgage. I paid for it with my savings, signed the paperwork, and kept the whole process simple. When they handed me the keys, I sat alone in the empty living room and listened to the silence like it was the best sound I'd ever heard. Then I started moving out the same way people do when they know their family might interfere. Quietly, slowly. One trip at a time. I packed books into duffel bags, stuffed winter clothes into trash bags, kept all my important papers in my backpack, and I moved the valuable stuff first. Not because I was paranoid, but because I knew what bitter people can do when they need somebody to punish. The day I rented a truck for the final load, I waited until the house was empty. I loaded the furniture I bought myself. My work desk, even the chair my sister used to sit in while mocking me during client calls. I was almost finished when my mother suddenly pulled into the driveway early. She got out of the car, looked at the truck, and her whole expression changed, like she finally realized she was losing control of the story she'd been telling about me for years. "What are you doing?" she asked, like she genuinely couldn't process it. I told her I was moving out. A second later, my sister showed up in the doorway with her phone already in her hand. Her eyes lit up the same way they always did when she thought she had a chance to embarrass somebody. My dad stood behind them, quiet as usual, staring at me like he was waiting to pass judgment. None of them asked where I was going. They asked how. My sister laughed and said, "With what money?" My mother stared at me like she expected me to finally admit I was failing. My father asked if somebody was helping me, his voice full of suspicion. So I answered calmly like I was talking about the weather. "I have a job, a real one. I've had one for years." The silence after that almost made me laugh. My mother blinked a few times, then scoffed. My sister tilted her head and said, "Sure." My father asked me for proof, like I needed permission from him to exist. But I didn't argue. I didn't pull out bank statements or explain my business. I just said, "I don't want to live here anymore and keep being treated like a burden." My mother instantly started complaining about bills and groceries and how hard life would be now, like supporting me had been some exhausting charity project. My sister called me dramatic under her breath. My father didn't say much at all. He just watched me shut the truck door. Then I drove away. My hands stayed steady on the steering wheel, and for the first time in years, I felt free. That's when my phone buzzed with the first notification, the post that turned my quiet move into public humiliation. But I let them celebrate. I needed them feeling confident before everything came crashing down. On the 7th day, I didn't wake up angry. I woke up calm. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and pulled up a folder I'd been keeping for years without telling anyone about it. The house deed, probate documents, letters from the lawyer, emails confirming exactly what my grandmother wanted after she passed. I printed all of it out. Not to be dramatic, but because paper ends arguments faster than emotions ever will. Then I went to the post office and mailed a certified letter to my parents with signature confirmation required. I also emailed them the same notice so nobody could pretend they never got it. It wasn't a threat. It was reality in writing. I explained that I was the legal owner of the property and that their right to live there had always depended on respectful behavior. From now on, everything would be handled properly, with written agreements, deadlines, and clear terms. I gave them 2 choices. Either sign a month-to-month lease at normal market rent and transfer the utilities into their own names by a certain date, or move out before the legal notice period expired. No yelling, no insults, just options. After I hit send, I put my phone face down and went back to drinking coffee in my quiet apartment. The first phone call came less than 10 minutes later. Then another. Then my phone completely exploded. 24 missed calls, 33 messages. My mother's texts were pure chaos. "How could you do this to us? Are you trying to give your father a heart attack? Who's putting these ideas in your head? Family doesn't treat each other this way. My father left 3 voicemails back to back, each one colder than the last, like he thought fear would push me back into line. He demanded I come to the house immediately. He said he'd contact a lawyer, said I had no idea what I was doing. At first, my sister didn't sound scared at all. She sounded annoyed, like I had embarrassed her somehow, not like she'd publicly humiliated me online in front of over 1,000 people. "Okay, you made your point," she texted. "Can you stop now? You're being ridiculously dramatic." When I ignored her, the tone changed fast. She started sending voice notes with that fake nervous laugh people use when they know they're losing control. "It was just a joke, Danny. Everybody jokes around. Why are you acting crazy over this?" Then my aunt got involved, because of course she did. She sent me a giant message about respect, gratitude, and how disappointed my grandmother would supposedly be in me. Which honestly almost made me laugh, considering my grandmother was the only reason I had any authority in the first place. I listened to every voicemail once, read every message once. Then I finally answered with a single sentence and attached a screenshot of the Facebook post. Their names, their comments, their likes, their laughter, their jokes. All of it. I replied with one sentence. "You called me a freeloader in public. Now you can learn how to be independent in private." My mother called right away, crying so hard she could barely breathe. But even through the tears, she was still trying to control the conversation. "You know we didn't mean it. You know your sister exaggerates. People are going to talk about this. How am I supposed to afford everything now?" And right then, something finally became clear to me. They weren't calling because they loved me or missed me. They were panicking because the safety net they'd relied on for years had finally stopped lying down for them. I calmly told her, "I gave you options." Then I hung up. And for the first time in my life, their silence felt peaceful instead of painful. A few days later, I sent over the lease agreement. Not some emotional note, not an empty threat. A real month-to-month rental contract based on a standard Ohio lease template with a few extra conditions added in. The kind landlords use when they want everything official and enforceable. The rent was $2,550 a month. That wasn't revenge. That was the actual market price for a 3-bedroom house in a decent Columbus suburb. But the amount wasn't even the most important part. The real condition was simple. Every utility account had to be transferred into their own names before the deadline. Electric through AEP Ohio, gas through Columbia Gas, internet through Spectrum. For years, all those accounts stayed under my name because it was easier that way. Because I was always the one quietly fixing problems behind the scenes. My mother would promise to handle things, then ignore the bills until shutoff notices started showing up. I wasn't doing that anymore. I made the deadline impossible to miss. Bold letters, email copy, certified mail. You have 10 days to sign the lease or provide written notice of your moving plans. What came back wasn't negotiation. It was disrespect disguised as family discussion. My father texted me like he still controlled me. "This is ridiculous. We are not paying rent to our own daughter." My mother sent long emotional paragraphs about greed, betrayal, and how I was destroying the family over a harmless joke. My sister tried a different angle, the same one she always used whenever she wanted to regain control of the situation. She said I was embarrassing her, said people had started messaging her and asking questions. Then she told me to stop acting dramatic. After that, she offered me $400 like she was being generous. $400, like I was the desperate one begging them to stay. That's when I realized something important. They didn't just disrespect me, they honestly believed I'd fold the second they pushed hard enough, because that's what I'd always done before. So I made sure the next move didn't depend on whether they took me seriously or not. I made one public post, no insults, no threats, no emotional rant, just a simple statement. I said I had moved out and wanted to correct a false story that had been spread publicly about me. Then I attached 2 screenshots. One was the deed to the house with my personal information blurred out, but the county seal still visible. The other was the Facebook post where my own family called me a freeloader. I wrote, "I stayed quiet for years, but I'm done letting people rewrite reality. If you laughed at that post, you laughed at a situation you never actually understood." I didn't tag anybody. I didn't beg for sympathy. I just posted the proof and let people figure it out themselves. The reaction changed almost immediately. People who had liked the original post without thinking suddenly started asking questions. "Wait, you own the house? Your family posted that about you while living in your property? Even a couple neighbors I barely knew messaged me privately to apologize for the comments they'd made before they knew the truth. And my sister, who had enjoyed humiliating me online so much, suddenly became very quiet. Because people like her hate losing an audience more than anything else. Behind the scenes, my family completely lost it. My mother threatened to tell people I was mentally unstable. My father claimed he would challenge the will, even though probate had already been settled years earlier and the paperwork was airtight. Then my aunt called me with that fake sweet voice people use when they want to shame you politely. "Sweetheart, just delete the post and move on. Your mother is under so much stress." So I asked her one simple question. "Are you offering to pay their rent or let them stay with you?" There was a long pause. Then she quietly said, "Well, that's not really what I meant." Exactly. The deadline came and went. No signed lease, no utility transfers, no moving plans. Just more emotional messages designed to guilt me instead of solve anything. So I followed through exactly the way I said I would. I called AEP Ohio and scheduled the electricity under my name to be shut off on the date listed in the notice. Then I called Columbia Gas and canceled that account too. After that, I contacted Spectrum and disconnected the internet service at the house. It wasn't revenge in some dramatic movie sense. It was what happens when adults refuse to take responsibility. If they wanted to live there, they could open their own accounts like everyone else does. The morning the shutoffs happened, my phone exploded again. My mother called screaming that the house was freezing, the stove didn't work, and my father couldn't do anything without internet access. She kept yelling that I was destroying their lives. My sister left a voice message that sounded half angry and half hysterical. "This is insane, Danny. You're actually crazy." But my father didn't yell. For the first time in my life, he sounded scared. Not angry, not commanding, scared. Like a man finally realizing his authority only works when somebody agrees to believe in it. And quietly, almost painfully, he said, "Please, turn it back on. We'll talk. We'll figure this out." That word, talk, almost made me laugh. Talking was all they ever did while I stayed quiet and took it. I didn't argue or gloat. I kept sending the same reply. "The accounts were under my name. I gave you time to transfer them. You chose not to." The second life got uncomfortable. They did exactly what I expected. They packed their bags and moved into my aunt's guest room. The same people who called me a freeloader online were suddenly sleeping on someone else's couch. My sister started posting dramatic quotes about betrayal and toxic family, but people weren't supporting her anymore. Some friends asked what really happened, and when she snapped at them, they backed off. My mother tried acting like the victim at work, borrowing money from coworkers to cover bills. Eventually, people noticed the pattern, and her hours got cut. My father started looking for temporary jobs because the credit cards were maxed out and they no longer had the house protecting them. Still, they believed I'd give in eventually. Maybe the old version of me would have. But the old me paid rent to live in my own house and stayed quiet just to keep peace. The new me had paperwork, deadlines, and boundaries. My father kept threatening lawyers and talking about contesting the will, convinced no judge would side with me over family. But courts don't care about guilt or tradition. They care about documents and process. And I had everything documented. Every notice, every message, every deadline. So when I filed for eviction, I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because by then, this wasn't a family fight anymore. It was business. At the hearing, my family showed up dressed like appearances could save them. My mother wore her usual sad expression for sympathy. My sister acted like she still had an audience. My father stood too close to me like he used to when I was younger, trying to intimidate me without words. But once the hearing started, the judge didn't ask about feelings. The judge asked for proof. And that's when my family finally started to crack. My father's voice got louder, then quieter, then shaky. My mother tried crying. My sister kept interrupting me. I never raised my voice once. I handed the judge everything. Certified mail receipts, the notices, the lease agreement they refused to sign, the utility deadlines, and screenshots of the public post that explained why this was no longer being handled privately. The judge stayed calm, but I could tell the moment the timeline clicked. They had been given options. They ignored every one of them. The eviction order was approved. No drama, just procedure. But to my family, it felt like the floor disappeared under them. Outside the courtroom, my mother grabbed my arm like she still had some claim over me. Her nails pressed into my sleeve while she whispered, "You're really doing this? You're going to ruin us." My sister called me evil. My father stepped in and told me to be reasonable, like I was the one who humiliated family online in front of hundreds of people. I looked at my mother's hand, gently pulled away, and said calmly, "I gave you a lease. I gave you time. You chose pride." Then I walked away. The strange thing was how calm I felt. I thought I'd feel guilty or victorious. Instead, I just felt lighter, like I'd finally put down something heavy I'd been carrying for years. The day they moved out, I didn't stand there celebrating. I wasn't interested in revenge like that. I only stopped by briefly because my lawyer advised me to make sure the property stayed in good condition. My father avoided looking at me. My mother slammed drawers and stomped through the house like she wanted to punish the walls before leaving, acting like everything still belonged to her. My sister stayed glued to her phone, posting vague quotes about betrayal and toxic people while her suitcases sat by the front door. At one point, loud enough for me to hear, she said people would eventually find out what kind of person I really was.